Rebecca will be living with us from today. Actually, we're dating," Matthew, my husband, declared to me with a grin. "I got a boyfriend and a housekeeper. And of course, by housekeeper, I mean you." My mom Rebecca draped over Matthew's shoulder, laughing at me mockingly. How could they say such things so nonchalantly in this situation? I had just received word that my family home had completely burned down and had gone to see it. I was extremely shocked that the home filled with memories of my late father was gone. However, in contrast to me, my mom seemed unfazed. Even though her own house had burned down, I felt something was off about how she didn't seem sad at all. But I never imagined that as soon as Matthew brought her home with him, they would spout such ridiculous nonsense to me. As I stared at them in disbelief, Matthew laughingly said, "Too shocked to even speak?" Completely missing the point. "You must be caught off guard that Rebecca and I are dating." He laughed. "We're so in love." "Sorry, but I'll be living here starting today, so as the housekeeper, you better take good care of me too. For starters, I want steak for dinner tonight." At her words, I couldn't help but spit out, "Disgusting. The nerve of you two." I don't usually use such harsh language, so the two of them looked surprised. "I already knew about your relationship. I have proof, so I'll be suing you for damages." My name is Katie. I'm a 35-year-old sales rep at a major trading company. I met my husband Matthew, who is a web designer, through work. He was a very dedicated worker with flexible thinking. As I grew to respect him, I also wanted to get to know him better, so I boldly asked him out to dinner. When I was with him, I felt I could be my natural self, which was very comfortable. From there, our relationship progressed smoothly. Then, about 2 years into dating, he proposed and we decided to get married. "Katie, let's get married. In my life, I know I'll never meet a woman more amazing than you. Will you stay by my side forever?" He doesn't usually say such cheesy lines, but this time he said it with an embarrassed smile. His voice trembled a bit, likely from nerves. "Of course. I feel the same. I'll never meet or love anyone more than you. Let's get married." I accepted his proposal with words overflowing with just as much love. Soon after, he came to my family home to greet my mother. My father had passed away from illness 5 years ago, so my mom lived alone. At 58, my mom is such a beauty that she's mistaken for being in her 40s or even 30s. Not only is she beautiful, she puts in the effort to look young. With luxurious eyelash extensions, vivid pink lipstick, her long beautiful hair perfectly curled, and wearing a miniskirt, no one would think she's 58. Mom has always been gorgeous, so whenever classmates would say things like, "Whose mom is that? She's so pretty." At school events, it made me happy too. But when they found out she was my mom, my classmates would make a fuss. "You don't look alike," which depressed me every time. It's true I don't resemble my mom. If anything, I take after my late father. He looked nervous as he deeply bowed his head and greeted my beautiful mom. "Nice to meet you. I'm Matthew. It's a pleasure." After looking Matthew up and down, Mom's face broke into a huge smile. "Matthew, don't be so nervous. I'm Katie's mom. Now, let's all have some coffee." "Matthew, don't be so nervous. I'm Katie's mom. Now, let's all have some coffee." Mom spoke in an even higher pitch than usual as she showed Matthew to the living room. "Yes. Thank you so much." Mom seemed relieved by Matthew's welcoming attitude. The three of us gathered around the table, but for some reason, Mom sat next to him. I ended up sitting across from them, and I couldn't help but voice my displeasure to Mom. Hey Mom, why are you sitting next to Matthew? Oh, what's the big deal? It's easier to have a heart-to-heart conversation when you're sitting next to someone rather than across from them. After all, he's going to be my precious daughter's husband, so I need to get to know him well. Mom smiled broadly. Matthew seemed a bit perplexed. Katie, I'm fine with this, he said. See, Matthew says it's okay too. As she spoke, Mom linked her arm with him. Hey! Don't link arms with him. You're making him uncomfortable. Geez. It's not a big deal. Katie, you're so fussy. Mom unlinked her arm reluctantly, puffing out her cheeks. Matthew, Katie has always been a nag. She gets angry so easily. Katie, I'm totally fine. Matthew smiled at me reassuringly. Afterwards, the three of us talked while drinking coffee, and Mom was in a good mood the whole time. Matthew is so wonderful. I'm so happy that Katie is marrying such a handsome man. Mom kept casually touching him. She didn't link arms with him again, so I didn't scold her every time, but I felt an uncomfortable, uneasy feeling. As the greetings were coming to an end, Matthew said in a formal tone, I'd like to pay my respects to your father's photo, if that's all right. Oh, how sweet! The photo is over here. Mom happily showed him to the photo. She was impressed by his politeness. He's so well-mannered, and seemed to really like him, saying, on the way back from my parents' house, I apologized to him for Mom's behavior. Matthew, thank you for today. I'm sorry Mom kept touching you so much. No, it's totally fine. I'm relieved that your mom is such a friendly person. I think we'll get along well from now on. I was worried that he might be fed up with Mom's overly familiar attitude, but when he said that, I felt relieved too. The following week, we went to his parents' house for a family meeting, and we were able to get married without any issues. We finished moving into our new home and started our newlywed life. Although we were spending our days smoothly, there was one thing I felt guilty about towards him. My job required frequent business trips, so I often had to leave home soon after getting married. I felt guilty about leaving the housework to him, who worked from home, while I went on business trips, but he supported my work without a single complaint. I'm not good at housework, but since Katie usually does most of it, I have to do my best at least while you're away on trips. When he smiled and said that, I truly felt that I was glad I married him. Then one day, when I came back from a business trip, there was an unexpected person there. Welcome back, Katie. The stew will be ready soon, so let's all eat together. I already made the salad and put it in the fridge. Oh, I didn't expect you're here. That's right, the person stirring the pot and smiling brightly was my mom. Matthew said it was hard for him to do all the housework alone, so Rebecca came all the way here to help out. I'm really grateful, he told me happily, sitting comfortably on the living room sofa. All right, the stew is ready, so let's all have dinner. With that, Mom set the table with salad, cream stew, and baguettes. The delicious smell made my stomach growl. Mom, thank you. Let's eat. I thanked Mom and dug into her home cooking. It had been a while since I tasted Mom's cooking, but the familiar flavors filled my heart with warmth and satisfaction. Rebecca, this is amazing. I could eat this forever. Matthew also praised Mom's cooking, and Mom looked delighted. After the three of us enjoyed a pleasant dinner together, Mom said, Oh my, look at the time. I should get going then. She started to head out. Mom, thank you for today. Oh, don't be so formal. I'll be back to cook again soon. When I expressed my gratitude, she smiled happily. From then on, every time I went on a business trip, Mom would come over to help out with the household chores. I was grateful to Mom, but suddenly Matthew's attitude became strange. It happened on a typical morning, just like any other. As Matthew and I were having breakfast and I was washing the dishes, he abruptly told me, "Katie, why don't you try growing out your hair and curling it? Your current style kinda lacks femininity. It's like you don't have any appeal." What? Where is this coming from all of a sudden? I was shocked because it was the first time he had said something like that to me. "I'm just saying, Katie, you kinda lack sex appeal. Your makeup is so natural too. Can't you glam it up a bit? I don't really like wearing heavy makeup. And I prefer my hair on the shorter side like it is now." I tried to answer calmly, but he laughed mockingly. "Humph, I can't believe someone as beautiful as Rebecca has a plain daughter like you." What? I couldn't believe my ears. I never imagined the day would come when he'd say something like that to me. Why would you say something so cruel? Why are you comparing me to Mom? I asked, my voice trembling. "I'm just stating facts." He spat out those words and retreated into his room. From then on, he constantly made comments comparing Mom and me. No matter how much I told him to stop, he wouldn't listen. Gradually, I could feel my love for him fading. Then one day, I returned home from a 3-day business trip to find Mom had come over to cook again. "Katie, welcome back. We're having fried chicken today." I was thankful that Mom was coming to help with chores, and I appreciated it. However, lately Matthew had been making so many comparisons between Mom and me that I was starting to feel resentment towards Mom bubbling up inside me. "Mom, you came again today. Thank you." I expressed my gratitude as usual, not letting the unpleasant feelings swirling inside me show. Mom smiled at me kindly, but Matthew sighed softly when he saw my face. "Oh, you're back already." I could feel my heart turning cold at Matthew's words, but I pretended not to hear and went to put my bags in the bedroom. As I looked down at the floor, I suddenly noticed a long strand of hair. I picked up the hair and muttered, "Why is this in the bedroom?" My hair was short, and Matthew had short hair too, so it clearly wasn't ours. Instantly realizing it was Mom's hair, I quickly returned to the living room. "Hey, I found a long strand of hair in the bedroom." "This is Mom's hair, isn't it? Why was it in the bedroom?" I asked Mom and Matthew, trying to appear as calm as possible. They both looked surprised for a moment, but then Mom burst out laughing. "Oh my goodness, you're right, that's my hair. It must have fallen out when I was cleaning the bedroom today." "Yeah, she cleaned the bedroom for us. You should be grateful." Matthew chimed in, agreeing with Mom. I felt uncomfortable with my mother entering our marital bedroom, and I couldn't help but suspect their relationship. However, with Mom helping out with the household chores, I couldn't bring myself to question them further. Around this time, my jewelry and bags kept mysteriously disappearing from the bedroom. When I asked Matthew about it suspiciously, "I don't know." He just kept insisting. About a month later, he suddenly said, "Hey, I have a 2-day business trip starting tomorrow." Matthew mainly worked from home, but occasionally he would visit clients. "Oh really? That's unusual." At the time, I didn't think much of it and responded as such. However, Matthew seemed to be in an unusually good mood while preparing for the trip, giving me an unsettling premonition. Feeling uneasy, I decided to take a peek inside his travel bag while he was in the shower. To my surprise, it was filled with vacation brochures and new clothes that were clearly not for work. I knew it, this isn't a business trip. He was probably going on a vacation. And if it was a solo trip, he wouldn't need to lie to me about it being for work, so he must be going with a woman. That woman was most likely my mom. I had suspected Matthew and Mom's relationship for a while, but now I was convinced they were truly having an affair. My mind was a jumbled mess of anger and disappointment, but the sound of the bathroom door opening made me hurriedly put the contents of the bag back as they were. I wanted to confront Matthew right away, but I decided to wait until I had definitive proof before doing so. Well, I'm off then. The next day, I sighed inwardly as I saw him off with a beaming smile. I considered tailing him to get evidence of the affair, but suddenly remembering something, I quickly went to confirm it. Then, in the early afternoon of the day after Matthew left for his trip, I received an unexpected call from him. Katie, listen. Something terrible happened. I'm in front of your parents' house right now, and it's completely burned down. What? I let out a dumbfounded voice without thinking. Hey, quit joking around. I'm not joking. Get over to your parents' house right now. Rebecca is in a daze. So the two of them were together after all. I wanted to confront them about it, but right now I was more concerned about my childhood home being burnt to the ground. Explain it to me in detail. When I calmly asked, Matthew started to explain. Apparently, the fire was caused by a cigarette Mom had tossed carelessly, igniting the trash can. Fortunately, the neighboring houses were far enough away that the fire didn't spread. I have a lot I want to ask you too, but for now I'll head over there immediately. Saying that, I hung up the phone and rushed to my parents' house. Just as Matthew had said, my childhood home was completely burned down, and the area was crowded with onlookers. The shock of losing the house filled with memories of Dad made my knees buckle, but I somehow managed to stand firm, staring at the charred remains. Then Matthew and Mom approached me. In contrast to my grief, the two of them were smiling. Mom had apparently been questioned by the police, but with no suspicion of foul play, she was released. Let's go home for now. At Matthew's words, we took Mom and returned home. As soon as we arrived, Matthew proudly announced, "Starting today, Rebecca will be living with us. I got myself a boyfriend and a housekeeper. And of course, by housekeeper, I mean you, Katie." Mom clung to Matthew as she said such a thing. Their attitude made my anger explode. Are you kidding me? How can you say something like that so casually in this situation? Mom, our family home burned down. The house filled with memories of Dad is gone. And Matthew, there's something seriously wrong with you too. I yelled at the two of them, but he just laughed and said, "Hey, don't get so worked up." He seemed completely unfazed by my words. Mom was the same way. Oh my, poor Katie, you're overreacting. More importantly, I want to share a bedroom with him, so you sleep in a separate room, okay? She laughed mockingly. I was utterly appalled by the two of them and fell silent. Then Matthew said, "What, are you so shocked you can't even speak?" Something completely off the mark. I bet you're completely caught off guard that Rebecca and I are dating. He laughed. We're totally head over heels in love. Sorry about that. Since I'm going to be living here starting today, you better take good care of me as the housekeeper, Katie. At Mom's words, I couldn't help but spit out. That's disgusting. You have some nerve. I already knew about your little affair. I have evidence too, so I'll be filing a lawsuit for damages. What? Evidence? Matthew and Mom looked surprised, but I showed them the hidden camera I had installed in the bedroom. Lately, my personal belongings kept disappearing from the bedroom, so I set up a camera. I thought it would catch the culprit. But when I checked the footage, your affair was captured clear as day. So you knew, huh? Well, that makes this easy then. I prefer a woman like Rebecca over a plain, boring girl like you any day. Let's get divorced. Matthew told me condescendingly. Sorry, Katie. And Mom laughed. You don't need to tell me, of course we're getting divorced. Saying that, I opened my laptop, downloaded divorce papers from the government website, and printed them out. I signed my portion and handed them to Matthew. Hurry up and sign your part too. Humph, you're being surprisingly obedient. I thought you'd put up more of a fight. Why would I fight it? My love for Matthew had not only reached zero, it had plummeted into the negatives. Like I said before, I'll be suing you too for damages. Be ready for that. At my words, Mom burst out laughing. Go right ahead, sue us for as much as you want. Matthew. Katie, you're such a money-grubbing woman. Laughed too. Ignoring the two of them, I started packing a bare minimum of belongings. Then, clutching the completed divorce papers, I left the house. After submitting the divorce papers at the government office, I decided to stay at a hotel and immediately started searching for a lawyer. I browsed the websites of various law firms, feeling a burning anger and determination to drag them both through hell. However, I knew that even without me lifting a finger, the two of them were in for a world of pain. Because there was something Mom didn't know about Matthew. When Mom found out about that, she would surely wail in despair. The next morning, I was woken up by a call from Mom. Hey! What's this about Matthew being in debt? I never heard about this. Hearing Mom immediately start screeching, I couldn't help but smile. That's right, Matthew was actually in debt. Back when he was single, Matthew had tried to start a business and failed. But I married him knowing that. I went into the marriage resolved to pay off the debt together, and up until now, I had actually been helping with the repayments. Hey Katie, are you listening to me? I thought Matthew had a high salary. He gave me so many gifts in reality. I coldly told Mom, whose voice was trembling. Matthew, a high salary? As if. His pay is low to begin with, and most of it goes towards paying off his debts. But even so, he was at least putting in the bare minimum for living expenses. Lately though, it seems like he's been using that money to buy you gifts instead, so I've been the one covering our costs of living. Ever since he started making comments comparing me to Mom, he had barely been contributing to the household expenses at all. No way. Wait a minute, then what about the damages? I thought he would pay for those. She screeched. I'll be properly claiming damages from both of you. I'm in the process of finding a lawyer now, so I'll send you the bill at a later date. You said to claim as much as I want, and I think the amount will be quite high, but make sure you pay it properly. Wait a minute. Hold on. I don't need a poor man like that. I'll return him to you, so don't file for damages. I don't have any savings. Return him? I don't want a man like that. Besides, I already submitted the divorce papers. So just wait to hear from the lawyer about what happens next. Goodbye. I told her coldly and hung up the phone. Then I immediately headed to a real estate agency to look for a new place to live. I found a suitable property right away and signed the contract. During that time, she kept calling me non-stop, so I got fed up and blocked her number. Some time passed, and we arranged a meeting with lawyers present. Matthew and Mom showed up, losing hostility towards each other. A few days prior, I had received a voicemail from Matthew saying Mom had thrown him away without a second thought. That woman, as soon as she found out I had debt, she completely changed her attitude. She looked down on me like I was trash and tossed me aside. I thought she would help pay off the debt together with me, just like Katie did. So heartless. I never imagined something like this would happen. That was the gist of the voicemail, but of course I didn't bother returning his call. It seemed Mom was drifting between acquaintances' homes, and now Matthew was living alone in the house he and I used to share. I told them, as I said the other day, I'll be claiming compensation for infidelity from both of you. Matthew openly grimaced. Are you really going to sue for damages? And muttered. Mom screeched. I don't have any money. To Mom, I quietly said. Also, the hidden camera I set up in the bedroom captured footage of you taking my bags and jewelry box. Mom trembled at my words, her mouth gaping. So I'll be claiming damages for theft from you too, Mom. Are you kidding me? I'm your actual mother. It's ridiculous to demand money from your own mother. Mom yelled at me, her face beet red. That's the extent of what you did, Mom. The accessories you stole included expensive items I received from business partners. By the way, what did you do with the things you took? Do you still have them? When I asked, Mom brazenly declared. I sold them off ages ago. At the recycling shop in front of the station. But so what? A daughter's belongings are her mother's too. Just overlook it and consider it a display of filial piety. Come on, please don't charge me any money. I heaved a big sigh at her words. Cut the crap. You are no longer my mother or anything else to me. You will pay the money without fail. When I said that coldly, Mom had tears in her eyes and a look of despair on her face. No way! I used up all of my husband's inheritance and ran out of money, so I got together with Matthew thinking he was rich. It all totally backfired. If I had known he was in debt, I never would have dated him. It seemed Mom had only ever viewed him as a host to feed off of from the beginning. What? So you were only after my money from the start? Didn't you say you loved me? He yelled at Mom. Of course I love you was a lie. As if I would ever actually fall for a guy who just has a decent face like you. If you have debt, say so from the beginning. She shouted back at him, and the two of them argued. The lawyer intervened, and finally they stopped fighting. Hey, Katie. You know better than anyone how much I'm struggling with debt, right? There's no way I can pay damages. Actually, why don't you and I start over? I really do need you, Katie. I gave a scornful look to him, who was trying to get back together with me even in this situation. Absolutely not. The reason you want to patch things up with me is because you want me to waive the damages. And you want me to help pay off your debt again, right? I can see right through what you're thinking. Ugh. He couldn't say anything back and let out a groan. To the pale-faced Matthew and Mom, I said one last thing. This is all your own faults, both of you. Have fun rotting in hell together. After that, Mom contacted the recycling shop where she had sold my belongings and managed to buy most of them back, but she still ended up with a debt she couldn't fully repay. In the end, it seemed both Matthew and Mom had to declare bankruptcy. Matthew failed to pay rent for several months and was forcibly evicted as a result. With both of their lives becoming difficult, the two of them reluctantly decided to cooperate and live together, apparently moving into a cheap, old apartment building. That apartment was about 50 years old and didn't seem to have a shower room. After some time passed, I received a call from him. I considered ignoring it, but feeling slightly curious about Matthew and Mom's current situation, I decided to answer. Hello? Katie! I'm begging you, I can't take living like this anymore. Lend me some money. He started ranting through gritted teeth. What? As if I would lend you money. Besides, I already agreed to let you pay the damages in installments, and you're nowhere near finished paying it off. I really wanted them to pay the damages in a lump sum, but they tearfully pleaded that there was no way they could do that, so I allowed installments. By the way, Mom also desperately apologized to me just like Matthew and requested installment payments, so I had no choice but to agree. It's impossible now. I can't pay anymore. My computer was seized when I declared bankruptcy, so I got fired from my job as a web designer. Now I'm scraping by day-to-day doing temp work, but it's really tough since it's manual labor. He tearfully appealed to me, but that was none of my concern. As I remained silent, he kept rambling on. This apartment is way too old. It's the worst. There's no shower room, so I have to go to the spa, but even the spa fees are hard to afford. There's no air conditioning in the room either, so I feel like I'm gonna get heat stroke, and it's so cramped that Rebecca and I are always irritated and constantly fighting. His voice gradually became choked with tears, but there was no way I would feel any sympathy. I don't care if you got fired, or if your temp job is hard, or if your room is terrible. And of course, the state of your relationship with Mom is irrelevant too. As long as you pay me the damages, that's all that matters to me. Why are you being so cold? Weren't we husband and wife? Was our bond really that flimsy? At Matthew's words, I felt a sensation of anger dyeing my vision red. Don't give me that crap. Who was it that cheated on me with my own mother? You're the one who destroyed the trust between us, you bastard. What dash? He seemed taken aback since it was the first time I had ever yelled at him like that. It's partly my fault too for not seeing through the true nature of a man like you before marrying you. I wish I could go back in time and tell my past self when I first met you what a lowlife you are. There's no need to say that to me. Matthew objected to me, flustered. Come on, I'm reflecting on it. Just lend me a little money. Don't be so cold. You're the one making me say this. I absolutely will not lend you money. Do you have any idea how much I've spent up until now to help pay off your debts? Well, it was my choice to help with the repayments, so I'm not going to complain about that. But you need to stop spouting this nonsense. I told him clearly. But Matthew still started to say, Don't ever contact me again. If you have business with me, go through my lawyer. Goodbye. Wait a minute. Fine, I won't ask you to lend me money anymore. But I have a request for you. Rebecca is still blowing money on brand name bags and stuff. Can't you at least tell her to stop doing that? He hurriedly told me in a rushed voice. I don't know anything about that. You two got back together, right? Figure out how to help each other somehow and keep on living. Bye. Saying that, I hung up the phone and immediately blocked his number. After that, it seemed Mom, still unable to control her spending habits, finally contacted a loan shark whose ad she found in her mailbox. She took out a loan and got her hands on a large sum of money, but apparently she spent it all on brand name clothes and bags in an instant. Of course, she had no way to pay it back, so it seemed she was now on the run from the loan sharks. I heard through my lawyer that Mom was asking for my help, but of course I ignored it. I hadn't expected Mom to be this obsessed with brand name goods and a luxurious lifestyle. Back when Dad was alive, she had a somewhat more modest way of living, but perhaps receiving his inheritance made her lose all self-control. Suddenly, memories of Mom from my childhood resurfaced. In that house that had burned down, I often made cookies together with Mom when I was little. She prepared all sorts of cookie cutters for me and even changed the flavor of the dough to suit my mood. In my memories, Mom was smiling gently, and I loved her very much. There was a time like that, long ago. Come to think of it, Mom's makeup gradually got heavier and her fashion got flashier over the years. Was there a reason Mom changed so much? I don't know now, and I don't want to know either. One thing I can say is that the current Mom is not the Mom I used to love. Exhausted from a life of being chased by loan sharks, it seems Mom and Matthew moved in a near escape, but the monthly transfers are still being made somehow, so I suppose they're living somewhere out there. As for me, I'm immersing myself in work even more than before. Now that I don't have to help pay off Matthew's debts, my savings are growing rapidly. I'm planning to take an extended vacation soon and go on a solo trip.
Are you trying to poison the family with garbage? I dumped that awful Christmas feast you prepared, all of it. Are you even listening? The Christmas feast. I spilled it all over the floor.
I could hear my DIL Kathy's vulgar laughter through the phone. All the food for 30 people, ruined. Just thinking about cleaning up makes me sigh. It sounded like my grandson, Terrence, was there too, laughing loudly with his mother.
Go buy some meat, quick!
And booze. Kathy chimed in immediately. Snacks and sweets too, buy as much as you can, she demanded. I felt like a servant. My desire for my son Sean's happiness was being exploited. But this incident will change everything. Kathy's reign is over. When asked where I was, I told her the truth.
I'm out shopping right now. Eh?
What for, you ask? To redo the Christmas feast that was ruined, of course. I didn't need them to tell me what they had done, I already knew. My name is Charlotte. I'm 68 years old. I work part-time at a care facility. Before this, I worked in the restaurant my husband Eric owned. It wasn't very successful, but it was loved by the local community. But that restaurant is gone now. Eric died in a car accident. It's been about 10 years since that painful goodbye. There hasn't been much happiness in my life since then. There's someone making my miserable life even worse. My eldest son Sean's wife, Kathy. They got married 11 years ago. A year before Eric passed, which was probably the peak of my happiness. Kathy is strong-willed and nervous, thinking she's smarter than anyone else. And everything she does is rough. The slamming of doors and cabinets is always so violent. The loud noises intimidate everyone around, making me tense. Honestly, I've felt we didn't click since Kathy came to give her marriage greetings.
Sean has his head in the clouds, you know. I'm always there to support him.
True, he has always been a bit clumsy. Teased daily by his younger brother and even more by his sister, 2 years his junior. But that also made him incredibly kind and generous, always thinking of the family. If he has chose her. Eric and I agreed to their marriage with that in mind. I've heard that families with strong women do well. Even when she called my beloved son Spacey, I could bear it for his happiness. Kathy is assertive and sharp, sometimes even daring. Each summer and Christmas, when it's time to come home, I'm reminded of this. Regrettably, it's rare for Kathy to visit us with Sean.
This year, too, something came up last minute. I'll follow later,
she'd say, trying to minimize her time at our home. Sean coming home alone became a Christmas tradition. If she doesn't want to come, she should just say so. I can't help but think that. Creating excuses to act separately each time, it's presumptuous. Even after my grandson Terrence was born, she caused me a lot of distress. Terrence was born at the end of April. Come May, I hadn't heard anything from Sean, and it was too soon for a baby debut party, right? Optimistically, I didn't check. But I later found out from Kathy that they'd already had the party.
Huh? Didn't we tell you? Maybe you just forgot about it?
She making excuses. I couldn't have forgotten something so important. I always take notes on everything. Kathy's parents came to the debut, and Terrence received gifts. I was completely left out. Feeling deliberately excluded made me irate. For about 11 years, I've been in this pointless feud with Mean Dil. Early last year, there was an incident where Kathy did something like never before. It started when Sean said he wanted to quit his job at the insurance agency to open a shop. He couldn't forget the taste of the Christmas feasts and the sight of Dad cooking, secretly aspiring to be a chef.
I want to run a small restaurant. I can't give up on my dream.
Kathy vehemently opposed it, getting extremely angry and lashing out at him. You decided this on your own, she yelled at him loudly.
You're being ridiculous. How can you not know whether it will make money or not?
I can understand the desire to stop a partner's reckless challenge. Men sometimes want to test themselves with such wild challenges. It was the same when my husband decided to start a restaurant. Initially, I was against it. But unlike her, I never went as far as to call Eric ridiculous. She's really harsh with her words. She says things without considering how the other person might feel. Eventually, Sean, perhaps in defiance of her, quit his job and began preparing to make his dream a reality. Afterwards, Kathy became openly irritated and angry with Sean and me. Half a year had passed since Sean started attending culinary school. Kathy began to directly contact me on my mobile phone. It was always about asking for money. Because his income was gone, life was tough.
Sean's selfishness is making our daily budgeting a nightmare. Please help us.
I wasn't surprised when she asked for money. It's natural for finances to become tighter in such situations. Eric's restaurant didn't make much money at the beginning either. Moreover, Sean hadn't even opened his own place yet. He was still at the starting phase. Feeling guilty as a mother for his behavior, I wanted to help as much as I could. However, I believed Sean didn't pursue a career in cooking without any thought. I had heard he had saved enough for the culinary school's tuition and living expenses while attending. Moreover, Kathy herself was working part-time at a company I knew. If they were still short on money, perhaps it was just she is poor budgeting? When I hinted at that, she angrily retorted,
I'm trying hard, but it's not enough. That's why I'm reluctantly asking for help.
She raised her voice as if to say she expected me to understand that immediately. It seems the costs of Terrence's tutoring and extracurricular activities were quite high. If that's the case, it can't be helped. But it's important, so I have to talk to Sean about it too.
Okay. I'll talk to Sean about it too.
You better not. You know how it is, right?
If Sean, with his pride hurt, refuses the help, then that's the end of it.
Indeed, that could happen. It seems I might have no choice but to comply with her, reluctantly. Thus, a portion of my already modest income became something for Kathy to claim and disappear with. Generally, grandparents find their grandchildren adorable. And a little expense for them doesn't hurt at all. How I wish I could feel that way. Unfortunately, I couldn't find it in me to think of my grandson Terrence as cute at all. In fact, I found him rather detestable, a feeling limited to Terrence. Somehow, Kathy had poisoned him against me. During his visits, Terrence would call me "Hey, oldie" behind Sean's back as a routine.
Hey, oldie, give me some meat. Steak for dinner, got it? No compromises.
No matter how spirited an 11-year-old might be, this kind of language is unacceptable. What does he take me for, his grandmother? There's no sense of respect for the elderly. Each time Terence spoke to me with disrespect, I caught him to lecture that this was not the way to speak. Courtesy extends to familiar company. You shouldn't call Grandma hey, oldie. Bad language will make people dislike you. Do you want to end up with no friends? I even threatened him with such consequences. Yet, Terence didn't care at all. Shut up, oldie, he'd retort, even more emboldened. Disliked? As if. All the kids in my class do whatever I say. It seems Terence has quite the influence at school. Moreover, his rough behavior extended to chasing around my cat, Mr. White. Because of this, Mr. White would always disappear whenever Sean's family visited. Terence's ability to make those around him uncomfortable and his drastic changes in behavior reminded me of Kathy. Like mother, like son. The thought that this was my grandson filled me with despair. In early December this year, a definitive rift formed between me and Kathy. The issue was, yet again, money. When she called out of the blue during the day, I wondered what it could be.
About the monthly money, can you increase it from $500 to $1,000? Why? It's for Terence, to put him in a better tutorial school. It would be sad if he fell behind his friends, right?
Kathy, I'm sorry, but $1,000 a month is just too much. I could manage the payment, but doing so would leave me unable to sustain myself. Then, Kathy's tone became harsh, calling me a dishonest woman.
Who do you think caused all this? It's your fault, isn't it?
It felt as if a line had been crossed. The rough manner of speaking made that clear. What world does a daughter-in-law who calls her mother-in-law you belong to? Kathy had stopped showing me the minimum respect.
Just borrow the money. You have plenty of relatives. Do that much.
Indeed, as Kathy says, I do have many relatives. My late husband had many siblings, so around 30 people gather at Christmas. But I've never asked my family for money, nor have they asked me. No matter how much she yelled or threatened, I couldn't give her $1,000. I resisted to the end. Then,
fine. Whatever happens, it's not my problem.
The call ended there. All I did was say what was impossible. Why should I be scolded like this? It's beyond unreasonable. I could never have imagined she would do such a thing that Christmas. Christmas went on as usual, with only Sean coming back first. I hadn't interacted with Kathy since that phone call. When I asked Sean, he said Kathy seemed normal. It seems she still hasn't told him about our conversation. So, as usual, she would come to our house a day late. I didn't mind. Just be myself as usual. What else could I do? The incident happened the day after Sean arrived, on the afternoon of December 25th. Sean and I had left the house for individual errands, greeting acquaintances. It appears Kathy had borrowed the house keys from Sean for the visit. Sitting at the bus stop, casually glancing at my phone, I noticed a significant change that couldn't be overlooked. I decided to skip the bus ride home and do some shopping at a supermarket that was open even at year's end. Right after entering the store, Kathy called. She was incredibly high-strung and rudely blurted out without a greeting.
Are you trying to poison the family with garbage? I dumped that awful Christmas feast you prepared, all of it. Are you even listening? The Christmas feast. I spilled it all over the floor.
She said this without a hint of remorse. All the food for 30 people, ruined. Just thinking about cleaning up makes me sigh. It sounded like Terence was there too, laughing loudly with his mother.
Go buy some meat, quick! only the finest quality. Got it? Understand, oldie.
And booze, Kathy quickly added. Snacks and sweets too, buy as much as you can, she demanded. Perhaps it was the thrill of their prank, but she seemed extremely excited. When asked where I was, I told her the truth.
I'm out shopping right now? Eh? Oh, good timing then. Of course, I saw everything you did from the start.
Huh? Kathy seemed confused. Even when I said I had seen everything on my phone, she showed no sign of realization. I told her I'd explain when I got home and hung up. I also explained the situation to Sean over the phone. I wondered what would happen to Kathy and Terrence next. Just thinking about it made my heart ache. The groceries I bought filled 1 eco bag and 2 plastic bags. A considerable amount. The moment I placed the groceries at the entrance, I heard yelling from inside. Sean was raising his voice, something rare. When was the last time I saw him this angry?
Enough! What were you thinking doing something like this?
His voice was so loud it made the glass tremble. Even Kathy turned pale. But her eyes still had a sharp glint. In the middle of the room, scattered with the ruined Christmas feast, she yelled back.
How many times do I have to say it wasn't me? It was already like this when I arrived.
Lies, all lies. She has too many secrets. Defiant, Kathy turned away from Sean with a sulky look.
If you don't want to believe me, that's your problem. Fine, we can just buy it all again, right?
Buy it all again? The same Christmas feast? That's not an option. I decided to enlighten Kathy, who knew nothing.
This Christmas feast was prepared by Sean for our relatives to enjoy.
She was surprised. Yes, Sean had been working on the cooking since early yesterday morning. I had helped with the preparations the day before, supporting him in various ways. After all his effort as a chef, the feast for 30 people was finally ready. I can't even begin to imagine his anger at having it all ruined. Now was the time to tell everything, without holding back. While cleaning up the ruined food, I suggested to Kathy that she should come clean.
What? Secrets? What are you talking about?
Like trying to get $1,000 from me every month, for starters? There's plenty, isn't there? Sean's look became even more severe. It was as if I had poured fuel on the flames of his anger. Kathy fell silent when told to explain in detail. I did the explaining for her.
Since your income stopped, she has been making me give her $500 a month.
Sean seemed quite shocked by this revelation. I'm sorry I kept this from you, I added, feeling remorseful. It was wrong of me to stay silent. I should have been honest with Sean from the start. Agreeing to her demands, thinking I was supporting my son's dream from the shadows, was my initial mistake. Enduring the depletion of my retirement funds when I think about it now seems absurd. Kathy's irrational behavior made it hard for me to make sound judgments.
When she demanded to increase the $500 to $1,000, I refused, saying it was impossible.
If you're short on cash, borrow from relatives, Kathy had said to me. The reason for asking for more assistance was to cover Terrence's tuition costs. The moment I heard that, Sean yelled, "You liar." It turned out Terrence wasn't attending any tutorial or lessons. Kathy was lying to extract money from me.
It doesn't make sense. I had arranged for the living expenses, hadn't I?
There was no need for her to request assistance. Tell me what you spent the money on. Sean's questioning was relentless. Kathy, perhaps realizing she couldn't escape the truth any longer, looked down. I've been silent, but I have debts. I've been using it to pay them off. Kathy had been engaging in online gambling without his knowledge, and she had borrowed a significant amount of money from acquaintances due to her addiction. The moment I heard this, I was shocked. To think my money was used for her debt repayment. How infuriating that was. I decided to keep revealing more. Are there more secrets? Come on, out with them. Like how you've been bad-mouthing me behind my back.
Charlotte! Please, stop!
Kathy, you and Terrence have been calling me an old hag together, haven't you? Terrence, who had been sitting in a corner, shrank under Sean's glare. I thought they might deny it, but this time they didn't. Maybe Kathy and Terrence realized their excuses would only make things worse. Good. I decided it was time to make Sean understand the pain I've been feeling. Especially Terrence, asking for oldie meat or old hag pocket money. Terrence turned visibly pale. I had no intention of sparing my grandson. No matter how tolerant I am, being called an oldie was infuriating. The frustration and sadness had been making me feel terrible all this time. And now, this debacle. It was not something I could just let go of. Terrence, perhaps thinking only of saving himself, exclaimed,
"It's Mom's fault! She called Grandma an oldie all the time, so I thought it was okay to do the same."
Hey! Terrence, be quiet. You don't need to say anything more. But Terrence's betrayal didn't stop there. He seemed to know exactly what his mother had been spending money on. As he was pressed for answers, he started revealing one secret after another.
Mom's been sneaking off to bars. Places with men.
Terrence, stop it right now. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Kathy had been going to bars without telling Sean. Moreover, she had been paying him hush money, which amounted to $100 a month. Such behavior was beyond normal. What lengths would this appalling mother-son duo go to exceed my imagination? She visits to the bar were her special treat only on days Sean came home late. Leaving her elementary school-aged son with money and neglecting him to drink and mingle with men at bars. Not the behavior of a sane person. And Terrence was no better. When asked how he used his allowance, he made an astonishing confession. He had been using the $100 he received each month to have his classmates do tasks for him. For small fees like $1 or $2, he had them do his homework, clean, and more. The reason Terrence could do whatever he wanted at school was due to his excessive allowance. You think you can treat your school and classmates like that? Shame on you! Sean's anger, turning his face red, was justified. What parent wouldn't be enraged to learn their child was engaging in such cunning behavior? Terrence, scolded by his father, sat down and burst into tears. A pitiful sight indeed. Even the usually assertive Kathy was tearful this time. Despite it being in her best interest to back down, Kathy attempted to defend her position until the very end. She insisted that she and Terrence were not responsible for ruining the Christmas feast.
We found it already ruined when we arrived. It must have been that cat that's always around. Please, you have to believe me.
What are you talking about? You called me, remember? Do you recall the awful things you said? Something about feeding the family garbage, wasn't it?
It was just a joke, a small one.
I didn't want to hear excuses. I showed Kathy my mobile phone screen, which displayed a video. The camera captured our current living room from a corner, providing an overview of the entire scene. It recorded Kathy and Terrence carelessly knocking down the neatly arranged Christmas feast, laughing rudely throughout the ordeal, with the audio capturing every word. Hearing Kathy and Terrence's harsh words, Sean looked up, appalled. What do you think you're doing with food?
And to speak such vile words towards Mom, that's just too much. What? Why? Is this some kind of secret recording? How does this video even exist?
It's a pet surveillance camera. We've installed them all around the house. Every time the eldest son's family visits, our cat, Mr. White, hides away. To keep track of him and what he's doing, I installed these surveillance cameras. I happened to check the footage while I was out, and to my surprise, caught Kathy and Terrence in the act. Imagine my shock when I saw them start knocking the dishes over. After that, I immediately headed to the supermarket to buy ingredients so Sean could prepare a new meal. That's when Kathy called me, hurling insults in an excited state.
Sorry, but our Mr. White is too gentle for such mischief. To try and blame a speechless cat for your actions, Kathy, you really are the worst.
Kathy was speechless, looking down. They probably came up with the prank upon finding the house empty. And as they began knocking down a few of the Christmas dishes, they got carried away and ended up ruining everything. To mistreat food just to spite me, their mother-in-law, alongside a child. While tales of difficult daughters-in-law are common, ours seems to be particularly egregious. Possibly ranking among the worst. The shock of the video evidence appeared to have a profound impact. She became notably subdued. She started to apologize, but her excuses were mainly about her own stress, trying to deflect blame. Not wanting to hear it, I instructed her and Terrence to clean up the Christmas feast. There was still a bit of time before the relatives arrived. I had purchased as many ingredients as I could. When I indicated it was time to head to the kitchen, Sean nodded deeply and followed. Preparing the food would take a considerable amount of time. There were ingredients that needed days of preparation. Since such elaborate dishes were now impossible, we decided to make quicker meals instead.
We can probably make a salad, roast beef, grilled chicken, and perhaps a soup in a short time. Yeah, I'll also try making some unique dishes with the other ingredients.
I stood in the kitchen alongside Sean. Indeed, Sean's training at culinary school was evident. I was captivated by his efficiency and organization, which reminded me of the nostalgic times cooking with my late husband. Given his desire to open a restaurant, his culinary skills were truly impressive. He created a beautifully colorful marinated dish with bell peppers and seafood. Arranged salads elegantly, topped scallops with roe and lemon, and prepared a sautéed salmon. Any restaurant he decides to open will surely be successful. I'm confident of that. While Sean and I were cooking together, Kathy was cleaning up with Terrence. I wonder how she felt watching our well-coordinated efforts. Hopefully, she's feeling ashamed of her actions and is reflecting on her poor behavior. Soon, the relatives started to arrive. My husband's siblings and their families, our second son and his children, and our eldest daughter and her children all gathered. Including us, there were 30 people in total. As usual, it was a slightly noisy but lively Christmas celebration. The relatives quickly noticed the stained seats. Given his desire to open a restaurant, his culinary skills were indeed significant. When asked why, I spilled everything about Kathy's misdeeds. Kathy and Terrence ruined it all. Really, what were they thinking? When I showed them the video on my mobile phone, all the relatives sighed together. Everyone looked at Kathy with a look of dismay. I'm so sorry.
Why don't you explain more clearly in front of everyone why you did such a thing?
Well, that's, You hated me so much, didn't you?
That's why you wanted to annoy me, right?
It's okay to say it now. I'm sorry. Really, I'm truly sorry. Kathy hung her head, looking uncomfortable. She repeated words of remorse several times after. What a miserable sight. Terrence, for his part, was being excluded by the children of the relatives and was on the verge of tears. Children can sometimes be cruel. When it comes to punishing wrongdoers, they show no mercy. During the Christmas party, Kathy and Terrence were marginalized. Not even Sean would engage with them. By mid-February, Sean and Kathy divorced. It was revealed that Kathy had been having an affair with her boss. The affair seemed to have lasted for years, with the other man's wife possessing numerous pieces of evidence. The affair was exposed after solid, incontrovertible evidence was gathered through discussions with lawyers. She tried various excuses, saying it was just once or that she was lonely. But Sean didn't listen. He probably thought her words weren't worth hearing. If I were in his place, I would have done the same. There's no reason to engage with someone like that. As a result, Kathy, with Terrence in tow, had to start a new life elsewhere. After divorcing Sean, Kathy was sued for a substantial amount in divorce settlements by her affair partner's wife. Once, she called me, asking for help in reconciling with Sean.
Charlotte, please, I beg you. Help me and Terrence. Sean won't even answer my calls anymore. This is too much. Please.
You ended up in this situation because of what you did. To say this is too much takes some nerve. Aren't you ashamed? A rude, shameless woman who cheated has no right to pretend to be a good person now. I cut her off, ended the call, and blocked her number. About a year has passed since the divorce. Kathy still occasionally sends texts or calls Sean. The content is always the same. Regret for her actions and words of wanting to start over. Of course, she also asks for money as well. Typically, she tries to evoke pity by mentioning Terrence.
Please, not for me, but help Terrence. He's completely isolated at school now. He used to be so popular.
Indeed. Terrence was popular. But that popularity was bought with excessive pocket money. Now in debt and broke, Kathy can no longer afford to give him any allowance. It could be said that Terrence's downfall is, in a way, due to Kathy's actions. Sean knows this and has been stern, insisting on reflection and not providing any assistance. Kathy now has 2 jobs. A cleaner and a part-time employee at a grocery store. According to what Sean has told me, it seems she's also doing some sort of piecework, similar to a side job. She has to work relentlessly, sacrificing even her sleep, just to make ends meet. Going forward, Terrence will need even more money. But she doesn't have the means to provide for that. It's possible Terrence might have to drop out and start working. Due to his parents' failure. I wonder how he feels about falling into such a situation. Probably, he'll end up resenting his mother, who caused this. After all, he's inherited Kathy's volatile temperament. In the future, Terrence is likely to become troubled. He might end up ruining his relationship with his mother, those around him, and even his connection to society. Becoming a delinquent, teaming up with similar companions, causing even more trouble for his mother and those close to him. When that happens, Kathy will have to face the reality of her actions. Thinking, what foolish things have I done? If only I had left the Christmas feast alone. Eventually, she may find herself unable to love her wayward son, leading to further family breakdown. Such a painful and lamentable future is easy to imagine. Of course, it's all her doing. 2 years after the divorce, Sean successfully opened his own store. Now, I'm living as one of the employees there, helping my son. Running a restaurant is challenging, where being delicious is just the starting point. What comes next is crucial. To keep the business profitable, utilizing social media, training staff, and developing new customers are essential. Fortunately, he has the motivation and persistence his father left him, along with some recognition. The restaurant that had closed after the owner's death has been revived in his son's hands. Such rumors have sparked interest, and thanks to that, the shop is thriving. We're kept busy every day. I hope to continue increasing sales smoothly and provide peace of mind to my husband in heaven. If he had continued to be married to Kathy, could he have focused on the shop this much? I think not. Her sarcasm and violence would have worn him down. In that sense, perhaps the divorce was for the best. I owe a debt of gratitude to the Christmas feast that was sacrificed that day. As long as my health permits, I plan to support his store. I may not be the poster girl, but I aim to greet each customer with the fullest smile I can muster every day. Seeing my granddaughter Mary not touching her hamburger, the server approached us with a stern tone.
You need to eat what you've ordered, or it'll be a problem.
Would you normally say that to a customer? Arguing seemed futile, so I responded humbly. I'm sorry. I think she's just waiting for mine to arrive. After my apologetic reply, the server walked away, looking dissatisfied. What a rude attitude. Trying to lighten the mood, I turned to Mary.
Let's eat, shall we?
But Mary remained downcast.
What's wrong?
Something seemed off. Then, the same server came back to our table, carrying something.
Here's the toy that comes with the kids' meal.
She slammed the toy onto the table. Looking up at the server, I saw her smirking at Mary. It was a chilling sight. Mary must have felt something was wrong too.
I don't want this.
She threw the toy on the table to the floor. She's never usually so rough. Now. We shouldn't throw things. As I tried to calm Mary and pick up the toy she had thrown. Suddenly,
Grandma, let's get out of here.
Mary grabbed my arm as I was reaching for the toy and shouted. Looking at the discarded toy, I noticed a piece of paper with something written on it.
Grandma! No!
Ignoring Mary's plea, I looked at the folded paper and felt a chill. It was a Saturday. I was on my way to my son Jim's house. It was a warm day, hinting that spring was near. Then, Mom, thanks for today as well. As soon as I arrived, Jim and his wife Kate left the house together for their once or twice a month Saturday work.
Grandma, what's for lunch today?
After seeing her parents off, Mary came to me with a lovely smile. How about we go out to eat today? Mary was delighted with my suggestion. My name is Ellie. I am 63 years old this year. When my son and his wife are busy, I come to look after Mary like this. Having lost my husband early and spent a lot of time alone, the time spent with my granddaughter was nothing short of happiness for me. My son Jim has always tried hard not to be a burden on me. Even though there's no need for him to worry about me, he's been working ever since he graduated from high school. Thinking back, his first job was terrible. It was then I truly understood what a black company was, even as a parent. He would leave for work early in the morning and return home around the time the date changed. You could visibly see him getting thinner, even though he was quite well built, as he continued with that lifestyle. Seeing my son Jim become increasingly distressed, I somehow managed to convince him, and finally, he decided to quit that job. It had been 3 years since he started working there. Though there seemed to be some issues with the company upon leaving, I felt relieved once he was free from that place. I'm going to be unemployed for a while. Jim said this with a look of regret, but seeing my child physically and mentally deteriorating was much harder for me. When I told him that,
I'll take my time to think and decide on the next place.
He smiled, seemingly reassured. Being a hard worker, he continued his job search while studying for a qualification in a field he was interested in, and finally, he found a new job. I was worried because of the first experience, but the new workplace turned out to be surprisingly clean. He would come home on time, and there was no unpaid overtime. Jim seemed to have some peace of mind and was lively and enthusiastic about going to work every day. When he started to be recognized for his abilities and got on a career track,
"There's something important I want to talk about,"
he said suddenly with a serious look. I'm sensitive to these things. He must want to introduce a girlfriend.
"Something important?"
I feigned ignorance and asked.
"There's someone I want you to meet, Mom."
My intuition was right. Jim had dated a few women before. I wasn't explicitly told, but you can somehow tell. But this was the first time he wanted to introduce someone to me. So, that means?
"I'm free whenever, so let me know when you've decided on a day to bring her over,"
I said casually, feeling a mix of happiness and sadness. Later, the woman Jim brought over was polite and greeted properly. I've always taught Jim to greet properly since he was young. So, the first impression was perfect. I didn't intend to judge, but I couldn't help noticing her appearance and behavior.
"Nice to meet you, I'm Kate."
She seemed nervous, her small frame tense.
"Nice to meet you too, I'm Jim's mom."
Wondering if I'd been staring too much, I greeted her brightly to ease the tension.
"Jim, why don't you two sit in the living room and wait?"
While they waited in the living room, I prepared some coffee. Before bringing it over, they were whispering to each other but quieted down when they saw me. As I served the coffee, I heard them say thank you. But then, there was silence for a while. How do mothers around the world liven up moments like these? It's my first time, and I'm just puzzled. Huh? But it's everyone's first time in these situations, isn't it? Realizing something so obvious made me laugh unexpectedly. Jim and Kate looked at me, puzzled. I'm sorry.
"It's just that it's the first time Jim's brought a girlfriend over, so I'm a bit nervous."
I decided to just be myself from now on. After all, we're going to be a family for a long time.
"I'm nervous too. But today, we have something we want to tell you, Mom."
Here it comes. This is the moment to listen seriously.
"Mom, we're thinking of getting married."
I thought so.
"We've already got the okay from Kate's parents, but..."
Jim stops mid-sentence, looking surprised. Next to him, Kate also seems flustered. What are they both so flustered about?
"Mom."
They peek at my face, worried. Wondering what was happening, I felt something cold spill onto my hand on my lap. It took me a moment to realize, but it seems tears were falling from my eyes.
"I'm so sorry. Did I do something wrong?"
It's the first meeting, and here the mother of the person they want to marry is suddenly crying. Kate's panicked reaction is now a funny story, but at that moment, she must have been really anxious.
"Oh, why is this happening? I'm not even sure myself."
Saying that, I laughed through my tears. I had no intention of opposing Jim's marriage. In fact, I was happy that he had finally found someone to be happy with other than me. These tears must be of happiness. But I couldn't deny feeling like a part of my heart was being taken away. After excusing myself for a moment and coming back, they still looked worried. With a deliberately cheerful voice, I said, "Kate, I trust Jim. If he chose you, I know everything will be okay no matter what." Kate seemed to be waiting for what I would say next.
"Promise me, both of you, to build a happy family together."
I could see Kate's expression brighten.
"Thank you, Mom." "All right, no more serious talk."
With that, I started asking about how they got to know each other and their journey to deciding on marriage. While Jim was seeing Kate out, I muttered to my husband's portrait. "Jim is getting married. Time flies, doesn't it?" It felt as if the portrait of my husband smiled back. Kate works at the same place as Jim, and she plans to continue working even after getting married. Jim wanted to live together, but I declined. I didn't want to intrude on the young couple, and I was looking forward to having time to myself, neither wanting to be a burden nor to burden them. They decided on a new home within cycling distance from our house, and Jim moved out. Time flew by, and soon my granddaughter Mary was born. I was amazed at how adorable a creature a grandchild could be. As Kate's maternity leave was coming to an end, I checked with Jim. "Have you decided who will look after Mary?" I was hoping for a chance to take care of Mary. Not out of kindness or obligation, but because I wanted to be with her. However, Jim thought I was worried and gave me a disappointing reply.
Mom, don't worry. Our company has a daycare.
Jim's new job really seemed to be a respectable white-collar company. I guess I won't be taking care of her. A few days later, Kate, who had been observing our conversation, brought me hope.
"Ellie, are you free this Saturday?"
She asked over the phone, and since I had no particular plans, I inquired about the matter. "Actually, both Jim and I have sudden work on Saturday, and the daycare is closed on Saturdays." I immediately responded. "Mary? You mean if I could take care of Mary?" I was leaning forward even though I was on the phone. "Could you?" I almost answered too eagerly, but kept my composure.
"Yes, that's fine."
My voice must have trembled with excitement. Kate sounded happy on the other end of the phone. Since then, I occasionally take care of Mary, which has continued to this day. As it approached noon, I took Mary out. As promised, we walked to the nearby family restaurant. I would prefer to eat at home, but after receiving suspicious calls and an unexpected pizza delivery while taking care of Mary at Jim's house, I felt uneasy. The family restaurant we were heading to was where I had worked part-time before, familiar and convenient for us. Upon arrival, the staff guided us to the usual spacious sofa seat. It was Saturday lunchtime, but it wasn't too crowded. "Mary, what would you like to eat today?" I handed her the menu while sitting next to her.
"I want the kids' menu."
Mary opened the menu to the kids' menu page.
"I'll have this."
She pointed to her usual choice, a hamburger. Mary really loves hamburgers, doesn't she? Seeing Mary's smiling face, I chose my own meal. Although spring was near, the days were still a bit chilly. I decided on the seasonal pot au feu. After placing our order via the touch panel, we went to the drink bar. Mary chose orange juice, and I filled a cup with coffee, then we returned to our seats. "Did Grandma know I like hamburgers?"
"Of course."
It was a casual conversation, but my face was smiling the whole time. "Right, Mary. Go to the bathroom before we eat." Mary often wants to go to the bathroom during meals, so I encouraged her to go ahead.
"Okay."
With a lively response, Mary headed to the bathroom. Her steps seemed lighter, perhaps excited for the hamburger. Her retreating figure was endearing to me. When Mary returned, the hamburger was served. But she didn't start eating. Maybe she was waiting for my meal to arrive. "Mary, you can start eating." I encouraged, but Mary looked at me puzzled. That's when the server brought my pot au feu. Noticing Mary hadn't touched her burger, the server spoke in a stern tone. "You need to eat what you've ordered." Would you normally say that to a customer? Surprised, I thought about the food waste issue and wondered if staff were instructed to say this. Arguing seemed pointless, so I responded humbly. "I'm sorry. She's just waiting for mine. We'll make sure it's eaten." The server left with a look of dissatisfaction. She was strikingly beautiful but had such a poor attitude. Shaking off my astonishment, I encouraged Mary.
"Let's eat."
However, Mary remained downcast and didn't touch her hamburger.
What's wrong, Mary?
Something seemed off. Then the same server approached with something in hand. Here's the toy that comes with the kids' meal, she said bluntly, placing the toy on the table. Something was wrong. I boldly looked at the server, who was smirking at Mary. It wasn't a kind smile, but something creepy, as if plotting. Feeling a chill, Mary must have sensed something too.
I don't want this.
She threw the toy on the floor. Something she'd never normally do. Under different circumstances, I would scold her, but this was different. Aware of other customers, I tried to calm her. Now. We shouldn't throw things. As I tried to calm Mary and pick up the toy she had thrown. Suddenly,
Grandma, let's get out of here.
Mary grabbed my arm as I was reaching for the toy and shouted.
What are you talking about?
I noticed something had come out of the discarded toy. Like a piece of paper.
Grandma, no!
Ignoring Mary's plea, I looked at the folded paper and was horrified. It was covered in what looked like a spell.
What is this?
I remembered the suspicious calls at Jim's house, with a voice chanting a spell as soon as I answered. Could there be a connection? Noticing something was wrong, the manager came out from the back. Is there something wrong? He asked, offering a hand as I crouched. He seemed to notice the paper in my hand.
What is this?
The manager looked disgusted. Standing up, I explained the situation. The unpleasant server just glared at Mary, silent.
I'm very sorry.
The manager apologized, but the woman wouldn't take her eyes off Mary. I feared for Mary's safety and hugged her close, addressing the woman. Even though the manager has apologized, don't you have anything to say? I had tried not to upset her, but it seems I reached my limit too. My tone became a bit harsh. Perhaps triggered by my tone, the woman suddenly shouted. If it weren't for this brat. She lunged at Mary. Instinctively, I shielded Mary, and the woman scratched me, yelling.
Move! Let go!
The manager tried to stop her, but he couldn't restrain her alone. Hearing the commotion, several male staff members subdued her, and someone had called the police. Mary started crying out of fear. I'm sorry, Mary, I said, holding my scratched area and comforting her trembling body. Before the situation escalated further, Mary and I were taken to the restaurant's office. The woman was there too. Emma, why did you do that? The manager asked her, but she remained silent. I'm really sorry. The store manager apologized to us again. As I was pondering over the situation, the police arrived.
Emma, 33 years old.
I overheard her name during the separate questioning. I told the police about Emma's aggressive behavior towards Mary for not eating her hamburger and about the suspicious paper in the toy. Then, Mary, who had been listening. Grandma, it's not that. She tugged at my sleeve.
What's wrong?
I asked, but she seemed hesitant. Mary, can you tell me that story? A young police officer gently encouraged her. I saw it. When I was going to the bathroom, that woman put shrimp in the hamburger. Mary hesitantly testified. It was a fact I hadn't known. So that's why you didn't eat it? It sounded like Emma clicked her tongue. The young officer seemed to realize. This child has a shellfish allergy. He finally understood and asked the manager to check if the hamburger was still available. Too bad, it must have been disposed of by now. Emma spoke up for the first time after the two had left the office, crossing her arms and legs with a disdainful look.
Could you answer our questions as well?
The officer sighed in disbelief at her questioning. That's what I've been saying. I have nothing to tell.
I'll keep silent.
Emma fell silent again, idly playing with her loosely permed hair, looking bored. Her demeanor changed drastically when the manager and the young police officer returned to the office. In the officer's hand was a plate with a cold hamburger. Emma looked as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Under the police officer's supervision, the manager cut the hamburger open. Inside wasn't just shrimp, but also crab meat used in crab cream croquettes.
Does this restaurant's hamburgers normally contain shrimp and crab meat?
The officer asked. Probably for confirmation.
No, they do not.
The manager seemed disappointed. Then, everyone in the room turned their gaze towards Emma. She kept her head down and didn't move, but then she started to shake her shoulders. Emma. When the manager spoke to her, a small voice leaked out. I thought she might be crying. But it turned out she was trying to suppress laughter. Lifting her face, she finally couldn't hold back and burst out laughing loudly.
I got caught.
Her voice was buoyant, like someone caught in a mischievous act, clearly enjoying herself.
I'll tell you everything. But I want that handsome guy over there, not you.
She pointed at the young police officer after hearing our conversation.
Behave yourself.
The officer who had been questioning Emma scolded her.
Oh, don't look so scary.
Emma winked, but it seemed ineffective on the experienced officer. What a woman. I could only stare in disbelief at the scene. The details Emma bragged about were beyond normal comprehension for me. She claimed to be Jim's ex-girlfriend, a co-worker from his previous black company. Jim was treated as incompetent there, so Emma had broken up with him. However, upon hearing rumors of Jim's success at his new job, she attempted to reconnect. But Jim. Emma showed no remorse for her actions.
I even graciously offered to get back together, and he rejected me.
She complained. Understandably so. Jim was already married to Kate, and they had Mary.
I thought if I could just deal with a child, he'd choose me over that plain woman.
She spoke as if expecting understanding, but surely no one empathized. Emma had been monitoring Jim and Mary, engaging in harassment whenever she disapproved of something. The delivery orders I didn't recognize and the suspicious calls were her doing. When I started bringing Mary to this family restaurant, Emma also started working here, learning Mary's preferences and allergies. I was horrified. I even regretted inadvertently revealing Mary's allergy myself. I embraced Mary as she leaned against me. I thought I finally had my chance today. After confessing everything, Emma sighed with disappointment. When her story ended, the police officer took her away from the office. As she left, she glared at Mary and laughed creepily, which made me tighten my embrace. After apologizing to the restaurant staff for the inconvenience and thanking the person who saved the hamburger from being disposed of, Mary and I went back to Jim's house. We waited for Kate and Jim to come home and then told them about the day's events.
That woman, she did what?
Jim clenched his fist, trembling with anger, but Kate gently enveloped his hand.
I had heard about her, but what a terrible woman.
Kate knew of her from Jim's stories. If only I had rejected her more firmly. No, it's not your fault. I should have been more careful, too. Leaving everything to Ellie and even making her scared. Both Jim and Kate blamed themselves. I felt the same. Had I adequately protected Mary while she was in my care? In the heavy silence, Kate finally spoke. At least Mary is safe. That's all that matters. To ensure such an incident wouldn't repeat, we discussed and decided that Jim's family would move. Emma was sentenced to a severe prison term for attempting to harm a child. Unsatisfied with the verdict, she became frenzied and violent in court, looking possessed. Watching her from the gallery, Kate and I decided to remodel our home to protect Mary from that demon again. Emma continued to chant spells in prison, deemed insane, and was eventually transferred to a psychiatric ward. I was certain she wouldn't leave there. Watching her frenzied state confirmed my belief. But still, we needed reassurance. Jim's family moved into a home equipped with security cameras, alarms, and immediate security response. Kate switched to part-time work for more flexibility and spent more time with Mary. We were determined never to let Mary be scared again. We likely still share that sentiment.
Grandma, why do you look scared?
5 years later, Mary, soon to be a 5th grader, peered into my face. Oh? Did I look scared? I diverted the topic.
Let's get ready. Aren't we going out to eat?
And also called out to Kate and Mary's sister, Lucy. It was Saturday. Basking in the warm spring sunshine, we started walking. Mary held Lucy's hand as they walked ahead, while Kate and I followed, watching their backs. My name is Kate. I'm a 48-year-old homemaker. In this day and age, some might think being a homemaker is enviable. But I'm not the kind of homemaker who lives in luxury on my husband's earnings. Ben, should I help you wipe down? I'm sorry. Ben, who's in his mid-60s, had a stroke a decade ago when he was still full of energy. Since then, he's been bedridden. All this time, I've been caring for him. We used to worry about not being able to have children when we were younger. But now I see it as a blessing that allows me to devote myself to caregiving. Life is strange, isn't it? Ben's body doesn't move as he wishes, but his mind is clear. Maybe that's why. He always seems to feel sorry towards me. But I wish he wouldn't. I don't find this life too burdensome. Sure, caregiving support services have increased compared to the past, and it's not like I can't take a break at all. But I started caregiving in my 30s, and now I'm in my 40s. I can't deny that my physical strength isn't what it used to be. So, naturally, I wish for some support. From my husband.
Could you give me a hand?
And then, I'm busy right now. Tom, my husband said. I might understand if he were actually working. But how is lying on the sofa and fiddling with his mobile phone busy?
If you're just looking at your phone, help out. It's your dad, after all.
I'm supporting by working, aren't I? Let me rest at least on my days off. Saying that, my husband frowned irritably and stood up to leave the room. It's always the same. He doesn't lift a finger. Even if he can't help with caregiving, it would be nice if he at least took care of himself. My husband, hand on the door, turned back and said,
Oh yeah, I have a business trip for the next 3 days.
Get everything ready. Again? Can't you at least?
I'm busy. You should do that much as a wife.
Shouting, my husband left the room. Does preparing himself challenge his pride? We're supposed to support each other as a married couple. How did it come to this? No choice. I'll get some help after the helper comes. I sighed and kept staring at the door through which my husband had left.
Is that boy off on a business trip again?
The night my husband left for his trip, as I was drinking coffee, Linda showed up. Linda, who can't get by without her cane due to mobility issues, is otherwise sharp. While Ben was sleeping, I took a break and helped Linda sit down by taking her hand and guiding her to a chair. After taking a sip of the freshly brewed coffee and exhaling, Linda said with a hint of sadness,
He's always away on business trips several times a month. I wonder if that's really the case.
Well, who knows? Linda and I are probably thinking the same thing. Harboring the same suspicions. Infidelity. That word flickers through my mind. but I deliberately don't voice it. What difference does it make if I find out about my husband's infidelity? He'll surely deny it, and gathering evidence would cost money and effort. But I don't have the luxury to deal with that right now. My affection for my husband is almost non-existent. And naturally, his affection towards me is the same. But having lost my own parents early, my in-laws are as precious to me as my own. I can't abandon them. After all, my husband does contribute financially to the household, so maybe it's better to leave his issues be. After a long life of caregiving, I've given up. It wasn't always like this. My husband used to be kind to me when we were distressed about not being able to have children. He used to be dutiful to his parents. But as soon as the caregiving for his parents began, he changed as if he were a different person. Acting on his own whims, almost as if he was single. He started leaving home frequently, claiming he was on business trips. He grew colder, not just towards his parents, but towards me as well.
You're such an unattractive woman. Eating with you ruins my appetite.
After being bluntly told that, we started eating separately. Now, my husband eats alone, while I feed Ben and share meals with Linda.
I don't want to sleep in the same room.
Since he said that, I've been sleeping on the living room sofa. But the kind and grateful words from my caring in-laws somehow kept me going. Just when I was feeling the distance from my husband, another troubling issue arose. The money my husband was bringing home decreased. Despite discussing various problems, he stubbornly insisted his salary had decreased. But I knew he was lying. I happened to see his pay stub. To my surprise, his salary had actually increased. I wondered if he had received a promotion, but that wasn't the important part. The problem was that he was lying and reducing the money for the household.
That's quite a sum for your parents' taxi, fares to the hospital, and hiring helpers. Our living expenses are...
What? Managing with the money provided is a homemaker's duty. If you can't do that, you're failing as a homemaker. If you can't even manage that, what value do you have? No matter how much I pleaded, my husband wouldn't listen. Seeing this, my in-laws seemed apologetically again. They even offered their meager pensions to help with the living expenses. Feeling sorry, I struggled to make ends meet with the money my husband gave. As a result, our meals became vegetable-centered and modest. My in-laws claimed to prefer such meals, but my husband would say,
"How can I eat such plain food?"
And he started dining out every night. Consequently, the money he brought home decreased even more. A vicious cycle that also lessened his time at home. And in proportion, my spirit dwindled away. On that particular day, Ben's condition suddenly worsened. A stroke had recurred. In no time at all, Ben passed away. Initially, I was stunned, but then tears wouldn't stop flowing. Linda and I hugged and cried in front of Ben, who looked as if he were merely sleeping. At that time, my husband was, yet again, on a business trip. When I finally calmed down a bit and called him.
"Hello? Who's this?"
A woman answered the phone, to my shock. My husband was in the midst of an affair.
"Hey, don't just pick up like that."
I heard my husband's voice, sounding flustered as he snatched the phone away. Normally, I'd be seething with anger in such a situation. But having just lost Ben, my heart felt numb, and I was surprisingly calm. Without confronting him about the affair, I simply informed him that Ben had passed away.
"Oh, really?"
His response was disconcertingly brief. Can someone be this indifferent about their own father's death? To me, my husband seemed as alien as a being from another planet. No, that's an insult to aliens. Even in space, I believe there's some sense of parent-child bond. Throughout the funeral, my husband maintained a detached demeanor. merely going through the motions of being the chief mourner. Relatives consoled the grieving Linda. Meanwhile, the actual son seemed to spend most of the time fiddling with his mobile phone and yawning. Everyone looked at my husband with disdain. Because of him, Ben's funeral, whom I dearly loved, became a dismal affair. A month passed since then. Between dealing with the aftermath of Ben's death and caring for Linda's mental health, time flew by. My husband was in an exceptionally good mood today. Because today was the day Ben's will was to be disclosed. Ben had prepared a notarized will, which doesn't require court verification. It was kept in the lawyer's office. Today, Linda was to bring it from the office and open it. Normally, one would assume the inheritors to be Linda, the wife, and my husband, the only son. I wondered if there was really a need for a will. Could there be a secret child? With bated breath, I watched the proceedings, reminding myself that as a DIL, I had no rights to the inheritance. The lawyer, called in for this day, along with relatives of both in-laws, were present as witnesses. As everyone watched, the lawyer opened and read the will. That was, Linda was to inherit the house and land, and half of all other assets. That was expected. But what followed was shocking. The remaining half wasn't left to my husband, the son.
What? Kate and I are to inherit the remaining half equally?
My husband stood up, shouting in disbelief. Indeed. The will unexpectedly left part of the inheritance to me. Stunned, I watched as my husband pointed at me and yelled furiously.
Why does my wife have to take the inheritance? I'm the real son. Everything, apart from Mom's share, should obviously come to me. But the will states, I don't care. It's invalid. Invalid.
My husband screamed at the lawyer. I was speechless, shocked by the sudden turn of events. But what my husband said next left me completely astounded.
I was the one who mostly took care of Dad. She didn't do much. What?
What is this man saying? I already knew he was a liar, but this lie was too much. He took care of Ben mostly? Who could say such a thing? I couldn't stay silent anymore and was about to speak when.
What are you talking about? Have some shame, you foolish son.
The shout didn't come from me. Unexpectedly, it was Linda. A dramatic soundtrack seemed to play as Linda's face filled the screen. Or at least, that's how it felt. Then, a close-up of my husband's shocked face. Silence fell over the room. Linda, usually so quiet and never raising her voice, had taken us all by surprise. My husband, stunned by her uncharacteristic fierceness, was speechless. In the midst of this, Linda continued.
Mostly took care of Ben, you say? Which mouth of yours is saying that? You do nothing but play with your phone or watch TV every day. You don't even eat at home. You barely contribute any money to the household. And to top it off, you lie about business trips to cheat. You really don't deserve a cent of the inheritance. What? Is that true?
Reacting to Linda's words were Ben's brothers. Strong-looking men due to their construction business. Confronted by these imposing figures, my husband seemed even smaller.
Eh? What do you mean? Mom, I might not have been home much, but the affair accusation is just baseless. Don't make random claims without any evidence.
My husband was stuttering and sweating in panic. Without missing a beat, Linda produced a large envelope. Where did that come from? Did she have it hidden? I hadn't noticed it at all.
Do you know what this is? It's filled with evidence of your affairs. I didn't think Kate, who worked so hard taking care of Ben, would have the means. So Ben and I hired a detective. Be prepared.
With that, Linda scattered the contents of the envelope. After my husband's scream, the relatives reacted. What is this? Ugh, that's disgusting. Really, my eyes feel dirty now. The reaction from the relatives was one of disappointment. The contents were numerous embarrassing photos of my husband and his mistress. What are they even doing outdoors? I didn't know my husband had such hobbies. Never thought I'd discover such hidden sides of my husband after 20 years of marriage. Like the relatives, I was appalled.
Shame on you. Doing such disgraceful things. Claiming you took care of Ben, saying Kate did nothing. Insisting the inheritance is all yours. How dare you say such things? You shameless, unfilial son. Apologize to Kate. It's not like that. This is wrong. It's not wrong, you foolish son.
Linda, calm down, please. You'll burst a blood vessel. It's too early to follow Ben. Perhaps it was Linda's towering rage that allowed me, the one who should be most upset, to remain calm. Linda, please calm down. Breathe in, breathe out, inhale, exhale. That foolish son. After some deep breathing, Linda calmed down a bit. But her anger was far from subsiding. Seeing her like this made me start to laugh.
Kate?
Surprised, Linda looked at me as I suddenly burst into laughter. I smiled at Linda and then hugged her. Thank you so much, Linda.
Kate?
For getting angry on my behalf, for conducting such an investigation for me. I really appreciate it. Of course. You are my precious daughter, after all. Daughter. I never realized how happy being called that could make me. Since Ben's passing, I've become quite teary, and once again, tears welled up. But I can't spend all my time crying. After stepping away from Linda, I wiped away my tears roughly and looked at my husband. You.
What?
Let's get a divorce.
Fine by me, I'll gladly do it.
I desperately suppressed another wave of laughter and then confirmed with my husband.
So, about the will, about the inheritance? All right, I accept Dad's will.
I looked at the lawyer, who slowly nodded. The lawyer was designated as the executor of the will. I was sure he would handle the following procedures smoothly. Taking a moment to breathe, I then moved on to another matter. Shall we begin? My statement was met with nods from Linda and the attending relatives. My husband was the only one who didn't understand.
What more is there to discuss?
To my clueless husband, I said with a smile. It's obvious, isn't it?
The compensation claim for your affair. What?
Why did he think it would all end here? With evidence of his infidelity right in front of us, it wasn't going to be just a divorce and goodbye.
Don't joke. Compensation on top of the inheritance. What a greedy woman you are. Coming from someone who pushed the care of his parents onto his wife and had affairs.
Really, the nerve. Don't joke is my line.
We have a lawyer here, and plenty of witnesses, so why don't we have a thorough discussion? I just remembered something I have to do. What could be more important than what we're doing now? Don't run away, you fool.
Before I could grab his hand, someone else grabbed my husband by the neck. It was Ben's brother, hardened by his construction work. Behind him stood Ben's equally formidable brother. They nodded in agreement. Muscles really do have an impact. After that, under the watchful eyes of the Muscle brothers, other relatives, and Linda, my husband couldn't flee. He had no choice but to stay and discuss until everything was settled.
Today's another beautiful day.
Looking up, the sky was cloudless and clear. Half a year had passed since then. Thanks to the lawyer, the inheritance proceedings went very smoothly. The divorce was finalized, and I was enjoying living alone. I really wanted to live with Linda, but now that we were strangers due to the divorce, Linda stubbornly refused, not wanting to make me her caregiver again. As a result, Linda moved into a nursing home with the money from selling the house. I visit her once a week. It seems like a wonderful place, and Linda seems happy. In the end, I feel like this was the best outcome. The house was sold. That means, essentially, the house was gone. As for my ex-husband, who was practically kicked out, well, according to the will, he received his share of the inheritance. He was overjoyed at first, but then his face turned pale. Why? Because the inheritance had almost vanished. The reason goes without saying. Compensation, of course. My husband's inheritance was gone. Not enough from the inheritance alone, so he also had to pay from his savings. As a result, my husband ended up penniless. And more than that, it seems his affair became known at his company. Particularly among the female staff, he was given the cold shoulder and became quite isolated, leading to a series of mistakes, it seems.
That woman, she's my boss, but didn't defend me properly,
he was saying over the phone. And it turns out that this boss was a woman and, astonishingly, the mistress was his boss. Maybe that explains the mysterious salary raise. But as soon as the affair came to light, he was dumped by the mistress, who also faced a demotion due to the affair and other ethics violations. I made sure she paid compensation too. That's only right.
It's your fault I kept making mistakes and got fired.
He tried to blame it all on me. But that's not my problem, is it?
You got used to caring for Ben, so looking after me should be easy for you,
he said, but no, that's entirely different. I couldn't respond with anything but laughter. So, I blocked his calls. I don't know what became of my husband after that. And I don't want to know. To forget about that foolish husband, I started working, and it turned out to be refreshing and enjoyable. The world is so much broader than I thought. A sense of excitement for a bright future welled up in me unknowingly. Gazing up at the contrails stretching straight across the blue sky, I squinted my eyes. I'm Madison. I have a husband and 2 children. After a long time, I returned to my hometown. Though I say hometown, it's actually my brother and his wife live there now. Both my parents have passed away. Looking at this house brings back memories. It's the place where the most significant event of my life took place. Now, it's a fond memory. Yes, it happened over 30 years ago. I was 32 years old and was married to a different man than my current husband. My ex-husband, John, and I were the same age. We had been married for 2 years. We didn't have any children yet. We met at work. Back then, I was a temp worker, and when I was sent to my husband's company, he was the one in charge of my training. Initially, he was reliable and decisive, which is why I married him. But gradually, I've started to notice some unsettling things. The in-laws' house, while not exactly close, is at a distance we can manage to travel if we decide to, and occasionally, I get summoned to do this or that. Sometimes I'm made to clean or cook. I'm sent shopping, and even tasked with rearranging the rooms.
It's pitiful for my son to have to eat such meals every day,
is a common remark. John has 2 sisters, and they both live in the in-laws' house as well. Even when I'm busy with chores at the in-laws' house, those 2 don't bother to help. Well, having them hovering around would be annoying anyway, so I don't mind, but I do wonder what they think. Do they see me as nothing more than a servant, being the wife of their brother? Since I don't live with them, I can bear it for a while and get through it without causing a fuss, as it's too much trouble to argue about every little thing. I guess this is what marriage is about. After all, we're all human, and not everyone gets along. Maybe they have complaints about me, too, and managing to get along on the surface is the best we can hope for. I try my best to follow their instructions, but the in-laws are the type to persistently nitpick and bully. I doubt I'll ever grow fond of them. And then they insist on living together. I can't comprehend the mentality of wanting to live with someone you don't like. It would be fine if John firmly refused, but for some reason, he sides with the in-laws' house and keeps nagging me. So, putting on a forced smile and skillfully dodging the issue has become our usual interaction. Until recently, John and I lived in the company housing of the company he worked for, but due to a significant change in income caused by his job change, we ended up living at my brother's house. We had to leave the company housing but couldn't find a new place to move to, and the deadline was approaching, so I consulted my brother and ended up staying with him. Incidentally, John changed jobs without consulting me. My parents moved to Anchorage, so only my brother was left at home. So now, it's John and I living with my brother in this house, which is quite spacious. Maybe that's why the in-laws' house people also wanted to move in. My brother, David, is 35 and is planning to get married in 2 months, in July. So honestly, it's not the time to let people from the in-laws' house move in, and we even want to move out before then. That's why I've been actively looking for a new place, but John doesn't seem too keen. I don't feel his intent to move out of this house. I can't just decide on a new place to move by myself, and while it's okay not to actively search for one, I at least wish he'd participate in the discussions. But whenever I talk about moving, he doesn't really listen and tries to change the subject quickly. I often wonder if he understands his position. Housework is mainly done by my brother or me, and he would casually take things from the fridge to snack on with his drinks. He seems way too relaxed. Well, I don't want him to be too mindful, but when living with your wife's brother, shouldn't a person be a bit more considerate? But then, I don't really know how people in such situations behave in other families, and maybe my husband is just tired from work. It's not something to get angry about, but I do find it somewhat awkward. One day, when my affection for my husband was gradually diminishing, an incident happened. My brother had to go on a long business trip and asked us to look after the house. So, for a while, it was just my husband and me living in the house, but then I received a call from my brother.
I had a change of plans and will be coming back today. If I make it back before dinner, let's go out and have a nice meal with your husband.
He informed me that he would be coming back earlier than planned. I had been on a day trip with a friend from early in the morning, but I planned to be back before dinner, so there was no problem. I was excited, thinking,
brother's treat.
On the way home, the roads were surprisingly clear, and the day trip ended earlier than expected. While walking home, wondering what to eat, and carrying souvenirs, I bumped into my brother on his way back. Chatting and laughing with my brother, we soon arrived in front of the house, only to see an unfamiliar truck parked there, and I could hear the voices of children and elderly people that I recognized. Wondering what it was, I saw John and his sister carrying out a familiar dresser. Moreover, the dresser they were taking was from my brother's room.
What are you doing?
I raised my voice and approached them, and his sister exclaimed, "Huh? Weren't you away on a business trip?" John turned pale.
Hey! Come here!
My brother dragged him into the house. I could hear noises coming from inside. From my brother's room. Following my brother dragging him, I headed to my brother's room, where I saw the aftermath of various items being moved out, and my husband's sister's 2 children and the in-laws freely roaming around. The one I saw in front of the house was Mia, who is 31 and married. She has 2 children, aged 6 and 4. There's also a 17-year-old sister in the in-laws' house, but she doesn't seem to be here today.
What's the meaning of this mess?
Oh? I heard you were out today.
I came back. Now, answer my question.
Well, we were thinking of moving in here.
What? Who gave you permission for that?
Permission? We're already family, so it's fine, isn't it? Besides, haven't we asked several times? And haven't we refused every time? This is utterly unreasonable. It's not a big deal. Stop being so selfish and learn to compromise a little.
Don't mess with me, old woman.
Just as I was about to get angry, my brother lost his temper. And rightly so. This is my brother's house.
This is a waste of time dealing with such idiots. Hey, kick all these people out.
My brother shouted at my husband. Mother-in-law Sophia was making a fuss about how the elderly are treated, but no one paid her any mind. The in-laws and Mia's children were pushed onto Mia, and they were forcibly sent away. My brother caught John as he was about to leave with them and angrily shoved him into the closet. Apparently, my brother was often locked in the closet when he was scolded as a child, so it was a reflex action. I was already losing affection for John, but I didn't intend to divorce him. However, this was just too much. It was a huge disappointment.
What were you doing? Please, let me out of here. Answer the question, what were you doing? Don't stay silent, answer me. I'm scared.
Scared?
Can't you explain what you've done? I'm sorry, please forgive me. Before talking about forgiving, tell me what you did. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. What kind of adult cries like that? Answer me quickly.
Realizing that this conversation was going nowhere, my brother left John locked in the closet and went to inspect the room. We caught them taking out the dresser, but who knows what else they've stolen. And there were unfamiliar items scattered around. It seems they've also brought things in from somewhere else. I was tasked with making sure John didn't escape. It appears that most of the stolen items were from my brother's room. When my brother came back and kicked the closet while yelling, John screamed inside. My brother was quite heated, so I decided to conduct the interrogation.
Hey, what were you doing? Planning to steal and sell things?
By the way, the dresser that had been moved out was ordered to be put back by the culprits themselves.
No, I wouldn't do that. Then where were you planning to take that dresser and the rest? Well,
John clammed up, so my brother kicked the closet. John answered while raising his voice.
I was going to put them in a rental storage. Why would you do that? Well,
according to him, the arrangement was for Mia's family and her children to live in the in-laws' house, and in-laws, he and I were to live in this house. Of course, I knew nothing about it. He thought that if his own room disappeared, my brother would have to move out somewhere else.
Don't you understand whose house this is? I'm sorry.
Further probing revealed that they chose my brother's room because it gets the best sunlight, planning to make it the in-laws' room. They figured once they moved in, we wouldn't have the heart to kick out the frail elderly. Also, since my brother is still single and doesn't need a large house, and since John and I might have children and need more space in the future, it seemed best to them that my brother move out. And today, they decided to go ahead with their plan since both my brother and I were supposed to be away. However, we returned earlier than they anticipated, and that's how we ended up catching them in the act.
I can't believe this guy. I had no idea he could be this foolish.
I was shocked that I failed to see how utterly unreasonable the person I married could be.
How can you even think this is okay? It's way too far-fetched. I can't understand your thought process at all.
It seemed like my brother's anger was overtaken by disbelief for a moment. Did he seriously think he could take over someone's house, force us to move out, and that we would just quietly accept it? Unless he believed the world revolved around him, I can't fathom how he came up with such an idea. Looking around my brother's room, I noticed unnatural gaps in the shelves where he kept his games and manga.
Hey, you took the games and manga, didn't you? Did you move those to the storage too?
It felt odd if he was planning to move everything to the rental storage, so I asked, and John fell silent again.
Answer me.
I pounded on the closet, urging him to respond.
I lent them to my sister. What? You can't just lend out someone else's stuff.
He was spot on.
I was planning to return them before you got back. That's not the point.
Further questioning revealed that he had been doing this for some time, lending things out bit by bit so it wouldn't be noticed. This time, he got bold because my brother was away from home for a while.
And you took the model kits too, didn't you?
My brother loves model kits and has many in his room. Just earlier, Mia's kids had broken some, and he was furious. He also has many unopened model kits in boxes. I don't quite understand it, but it seems to be a thing among model kit enthusiasts. He's been hoarding them, planning to build them eventually. I sometimes wonder why he buys so many, but they are his, after all.
I just gave them away because my sister's kids wanted them,
John confessed in a barely audible voice.
Don't just give away someone's treasured items. Some of them are rare. Do you even understand your position? You moved in here because you don't earn enough, didn't you? And by the way, this house belongs to our parents. We've talked about this before, right? Even if you managed to drive my brother out, it wouldn't become yours. How can you not understand that? Don't disappoint me too much.
The in-laws had been demanding we live together. I always brushed them off, but maybe I should have firmly refused, considering it came to this. Though, I never could have predicted something like this. My brother dragged John out. He was almost crying. My brother made him write a letter of reflection, while John meekly wrote the letter, stumbling over his words. This wasn't the kind of situation that could be resolved with a letter of reflection. Unsure what to do, I called our parents and reported what happened. They suggested calling the police and a lawyer, so I did as advised. The lawyer gave me a number to call, which was a relief. After the lawyer arrived and we discussed the situation, it turned out that the case was somewhat ambiguous, so we ended up settling. We had the in-laws write an affidavit, agreeing to sue them in civil court only if they breached the agreement. At the same time, I also discussed the possibility of divorcing him. Since we don't have children and don't share much property, the process should be smooth. The amount I could receive from the divorce settlement would be minimal, but considering our living situation, I wasn't expecting a large sum anyway. I had Mia return the items she had borrowed earlier. My brother was checking their condition. The manga had oil stains and some scribbles on it. The games and model kits seemed to be intact. We decided to have the in-laws take back all the manga and compensate us with new ones later. It seems the in-laws are quite weak when faced with authorities like the police or lawyers, as they complied quite obediently, which was frightening in its own way. When things had somewhat calmed down, I asked John again, and it turned out he thought it was unthinkable to refuse to live with the in-laws since we got along well with them. He assumed it was just out of politeness. He was sure that deep down, we wanted to live together. He thought that my brother-in-law, being kind, would give up his room for Mia's happiness. And wouldn't kick out the elderly since he's so kind. He was convinced that my brother would agree. I sighed. Did John mistake me and my brother for saints or something? Sure, I don't like the in-laws, but as a wife, I tried to maintain a proper relationship, and thanks to that, things seemed to go quite well on the surface. My brother also treated John with a certain degree of courtesy because he was my husband. I guess that's why he got the impression that we are kind people. But that's just a normal part of human interaction. In maintaining smooth human relations, people put on a mask, so to speak, utter social niceties, and say things they don't mean. And the other person, understanding that, doesn't take the words or attitudes at face value but tries to imagine the real intention behind them and thinks about how to react appropriately. In this way, while gauging the distance between each other, if one thinks the other person is someone they can get closer to, they gradually show their true selves. John was fatally bad at this. He tried to fit other people's feelings into a frame that was convenient for him. That's not how human relationships work. I explained all this to him. It might have been the last bit of sentiment I had for him as his wife. There are rare individuals who are thoroughly bad at this. Through interacting and engaging with many people in life, one gradually comes to understand and practice this. It's hard to explain and even harder to teach. The only solution is to gain experience by interacting with many people. I told him that this was what he needed. Whether he took my rather self-righteous lecture as just an expression of my anger or as words born from consideration for him, I left that for him to decide. At that point, I didn't feel enough attachment left to bother myself with him anymore. The in-laws were generally quiet. It seemed they were worried that legal action might affect the younger sister's education and future prospects. When I mentioned divorce,
You can't just decide to leave him.
they initially protested. Shall we proceed with mediation, then? She fell silent. It turned out that Mia and her family were the reason why the in-laws wanted to move into our house. Mia had moved back into the in-laws' house some time ago, but she didn't do any housework, and her husband, despite working, didn't contribute to the household expenses. Her children were noisy and destructive, interfering with the younger sister's study for her exams. They thought our house would be quieter, and it would be an opportunity to educate me as a wife. They figured that once they moved their stuff in, we wouldn't be able to object strongly, and given the circumstances, we would accept them. This was how they convinced John and led to this whole mess. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I felt utterly drained all at once. John was currently packing up the items he had brought from the in-laws' house. A moving company was scheduled to pick them up in the afternoon. Of course, the in-laws were going to cover the cost. I was ready to put an end to this, but my brother seemed unsatisfied. Determined to straighten out John's character, he had him doing housework and cleaning. Until now, John always excused himself from helping by saying, "I'm too tired," while my brother and I did all the housework. Maybe my brother had also had enough of it. John had been too relaxed in our house, freely eating and drinking whatever he liked without helping with chores. It was okay, but it was frustrating how he just went about his business without a word, and things would be gone before we knew it. My brother wanted to settle that score before kicking him out. By the way, John and I were sleeping in separate rooms. We ate separately, and I didn't keep any personal gadgets like phones or computers in his room, just housing magazines. And miraculously, the divorce was finalized, and he finally left the house. The other day, my brother and I reminisced about the whole ordeal. After all that, I met another man, built a family, and now it's been over 30 years. Life sure has its ups and downs, but being able to look back calmly probably means I'm happy now. They say relationships based solely on money end when the money runs out. That's exactly why we cut ties with my husband's family. It's been a decade since we made that decision. My kids, myself, and even my husband William have kept our distance from them. You see, William used to be all about visiting his family for any little reason, but even he got fed up with their constant antics. His parents, who live with his brother Aiden and his wife, both had long careers as full-time employees and retired with a decent pension and retirement benefits. And Aiden, working at a major company, certainly isn't short on cash. Despite that, whenever they invite us out for a family lunch, they never offer to pay. Worse still, they always find some excuse to make us foot the bill for various things. They'd ask us to order something online because they couldn't figure out how to do it, or to pick up groceries like salt, sugar, and other condiments because they'd run out. For instance, they insisted on a specific brand of steak sauce from a particular store, or a certain toilet paper brand. Nothing else would do. There was a time I bought a different brand, and they dramatically sighed, saying it wasn't right, and insisted we take it back home because they apparently still had some. As annoying as that was, what irked me even more was that they never repaid any of the money for these advance purchases. Back then, being newly married, I didn't want to cause a fuss and just went along with their demands. Looking back, I really regret letting them take advantage of us like that. But you know, after over a year of this, anyone's patience would wear thin. I realized something had to change, so I finally brought up the money they owed us. Then, my mother-in-law Madison showed a surprised look and said,
"Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about that."
I was relieved, thinking we'd finally get paid back, but she never seemed to intend to actually reimburse us. She just said it and left it at that. Despite our persistence, she made a clearly annoyed face and said,
"It's just some condiments and household items, no big deal."
When I kept insisting, she got frustrated and snapped,
"All right, I'll pay you." You're so persistent and annoying.
Then, she roughly opened her wallet and said, "Sorry, looks like I don't have enough right now. I'll pay you later." And closed her wallet without waiting for a response. I just felt a strong sense of disgust. I glanced at some bills in her wallet. She must have had plenty of money to pay back. I thought about explaining the situation to my father-in-law Lucas and asking him to repay us. But he always says he knows nothing about the household finances because Madison handles them, and he doesn't want to get involved. Aiden avoids talking to us altogether, and whenever we visit, he just leaves. Fed up, I vented to William and demanded repayment, to which he said,
"It's just steak sauce and tissues, right? I'd get it if it was $1,000 or $2,000, but it's just small stuff. Don't get so worked up over little things. You'll get wrinkles."
Furious, I threw all the receipts and the total amount at him, asking if he could still say the same. I don't remember the exact amount, but it was probably around $1,000. William couldn't believe it was that much and kept denying it. But you see, ever since I was young, my parents taught me to be very strict about managing money. They always said not to lend or borrow money, even from close friends. And if I must, I was to always note the amount, date, and reason. Besides, preparing a promissory note as well. So, I had kept detailed notes of everything I had fronted for his family. After I showed him the receipts and notes, explaining everything in detail, his initial anger turned to disbelief, then annoyance, asking why steak sauce had to be so expensive. I told him, if it was out of goodwill, I wouldn't be asking for the money back. But this money was for things they specifically asked for and promised to repay. Not paying it back is like defaulting on a cash loan. And why do they always ask us when they live with Aiden? It's just not right. You're not listening to me anymore, so I want you to deal with it. From now on, I don't want anything to do with this. I want to save money for us." He fell silent, then weakly said,
"But my parents are relying on us. It'd be rude to turn them down, and we're not that close with Aiden and his family. Besides, we should help each other out in tough times, right?"
I snapped.
"That's something the person who received help should say. When have they ever helped us? They haven't, because they never have. I get you want to help your parents and feel needed, but I'm the one being sacrificed, not you. If you think using your wife to show filial piety is okay, you're very wrong. Enough is enough. If you insist, consider this repayment as severance money. From now on, if they ask for anything, it's on you. Use your own allowance, not the household budget. End of discussion."
And with that, I went straight to the bedroom and slept. I knew he was indecisive, but that was too much. Still, as long as he handles his family himself, I don't mind. Even with his flaws, he works hard and helps around the house, and without his family's interference, he's not a problem, so I haven't considered divorce. But if he ever uses our household funds without permission or makes me out to be the bad guy, I would have gone straight for divorce papers. Despite their continuous requests, I kept directing everything to William, telling his family to ask him instead. The in-laws were surprised by my sudden change in attitude, but as long as their needs were met, they seemed content. They started calling William directly for requests. It's frustrating that I'll never see the money we fronted again, but if just over $1,000 means no more involvement with his family, it's a small price to pay. William kept looking to me for help each time they contacted him, but I ignored it. He deserved it for not taking my concerns seriously. I thought it was just deserts. However, about 6 months after leaving everything to him, he finally admitted defeat. He came to me, nearly in tears, saying he couldn't deal with them anymore. Recently, they had asked him to pay for renovations to their house, and when he refused, they called him an ungrateful son and said they wished they hadn't had him. I was irked that we had always been there to help, and then he opened up about something he'd never told me before.
"I've never said this before, but in my family, the eldest son is everything. Aiden is always praised, no matter what, while I've always been overlooked. Aiden would get whatever he wanted,
but I only got hand-me-downs. He'd get game consoles, and I'd get, like, a $10 gift card. So, when my parents started relying on me, I thought I was finally needed. But I guess I was just the spare kid all along. I wish I hadn't been born," he said, apologizing for all the trouble he caused me. I was surprised by his revelation, but I wished he had confided in me sooner. That way, he wouldn't have had to suffer so much. We decided to cut ties with his family and communicated our decision. Despite William's insistence that he couldn't handle it anymore and suggesting they rely on Aiden, the in-laws refused, not wanting to inconvenience him. It was as if they thought it was okay to burden us instead. But even when we said that, they wouldn't listen. If William couldn't help them, they would call me, and if I refused, they'd go back to him. If we turned off our phones, they would come to our house, banging on the door and the doorbell, creating a scene. If we pretended not to be home, they'd even call my workplace for a welfare check. During that time, I got in touch with my high school friend Sophia, and we met up. I shared with her the bizarre actions of William's family, which led to her feeling disgusted and then sympathizing with us. She suggested, "People like that don't realize how they're perceived. They probably think it's normal for children to help their parents. Why don't you try doing the same to them? Maybe then they'll back off." I was surprised by her unexpected advice, but after parting with Sophia, I immediately discussed it with William, and we devised a plan to visit his family over the weekend. Thinking we were there to give them money, his parents were in a good mood. However, we said, "Actually, we've been affected by the economic downturn. Both of our salaries have been cut, and our bonuses are gone. Life is tough right now. We want children, but considering that, we're really short on funds. So, we were hoping for a little help. To start, we need salt, steak sauce, and oh, we're out of bread too. Here's a list of the specific brands we want." And we handed them a list with high-end brands. They got angry, saying it was pathetic that we couldn't afford such basic things and that everything on the list was expensive. So, I said,
"But, Madison, you guys have asked us for similar things, right? Despite driving a luxury car and going on several trips a year. It's just salt and steak sauce, right? So it shouldn't be a problem, right?"
Realizing they had done the same thing to us, they started panicking, talking about their savings for retirement and how buying multiple items would be expensive. We responded, "You've always told us we should help each other out in tough times. We've been supporting you for nearly 2 years, so you can do the same, right? That's why we can't afford to pay for your renovations. We came over unexpectedly today, so we'll leave now, but please buy these items by tomorrow." And we left the list with them before leaving their house. When the promised day arrived and we received no contact from William's family, I called to remind them. Madison complained about our seriousness and criticized us for lacking manners, so I retorted,
"Are you saying you were aware of your lack of manners while repeatedly urging us?"
Then she abruptly hung up. After several unsuccessful attempts to call back, William and I decided to visit his family after work. Madison, who hadn't expected us, let out a small scream upon seeing us. We forced our way in, declaring that we would stay until they prepared everything, which enraged Lucas. He told us not to say such pathetic things because it was shameful. "Man, isn't that something you can't say, Dad? You've been mooching off us, and when we ask for help, you act like you don't know us. That's even more shameful. We're just doing the same thing you've been doing to us. If you call that shameful, then you're the same. And Dad, you can't keep saying you're not involved. You've seen Mom asking us for help. Even if Mom asked, if she hasn't paid, it's normal for you to cover it." William argued. They both fell silent. They finally gave up and promised to have everything ready by the next visit, asking us to leave for the day. I emphasized our request firmly before we left. On the day of collection, all the items they had prepared were the cheapest brands from a supermarket. Even though I was okay with that, I let out an exaggerated sigh and said, No, they are not what we asked for, is it? It's clearly written here. We don't need these then. We'll leave them here. And I left the items there. That night, they called William to complain, but when he pointed out that they had done the same, they hung up. After repeating it a few times, they seemed to be mentally exhausted. They had changed the locks of their house. So William started ringing the doorbell and shouting outside, pretending to be worried. When neighbors came out asking what was happening and William pretended to be concerned that they might have collapsed inside, the worried neighbors gathered, and the panicked in-laws eventually came out. Seeing them safe, William feigned relief, and they were awkwardly praised by the neighbors. With the neighbors on our side, they finally gave in after just 3 months. They apologized for their rudeness and agreed to repay us, asking us to stop. I replied, "What are you talking about? It's only been 3 months. You're making it sound like we're crazy, but you were the ones banging on doors and calling my workplace. We'll bill you for the renovation costs in a year." After exchanging glances with William, they turned pale. They finally came to deeply apologize, asking us not to involve ourselves with them anymore, and handed over some money. They added a bit extra to the amount we had fronted. The bundle of bills was quite thick. Seeing the elderly couple trembling and pleading, we felt it was enough. Since they had declared disengagement, we told them we would never involve ourselves with them again and would not take care of them in their old age. And then William and I went home. Just 3 months, but it's still a big deal. It felt incredibly long. We didn't enjoy doing it, but if it was so effective, we should have tried it sooner. The unfamiliar effort took a toll on us, and after realizing we no longer had to deal with his family, all our strength left us, and we both ended up taking time off work due to ill health. I had never taken sick leave before, so my colleagues were surprised. When I returned and explained the battle with the in-laws, I received mixed reactions of disgust and admiration, with some saying my acting was too realistic and creepy. With the in-laws out of our lives, we finally restarted our life as a couple. Thanks to reduced stress, we joyfully discovered I was pregnant just a year after cutting ties. We celebrated, feeling that letting go of bad ties had brought good fortune. We didn't tell the in-laws about the birth, raised our child with help from my family, and despite the challenges of first-time parenting and some marital disputes, we managed to overcome them. Having successfully completed our strategy against them, we gained strange confidence that we would be okay. Later, when our first child was 3 years old, I became pregnant with our second, and eventually, we became parents of 3, leading a fulfilling life. We couldn't afford the luxury like the in-laws, but it was no problem compared to being mooched off by them. We didn't know about their situation for a while after cutting ties, but about 5 years later, we heard details from one of William's relatives. Lucas had been having an affair with a younger woman and squandering money on her. Aiden and his wife both were caught cheating, and the over 40 wife got pregnant with her lover's child. Aiden didn't get fired but was demoted with a significant salary cut, and his wife eventually chose her lover and ran away, leaving only divorce papers behind. It sounded like something out of drama series, but it turned out to be true. Neighbors mentioned hearing them arguing constantly, and Madison, venting to the neighborhood, had told them everything. So, I shared our past experiences with the in-laws with the neighbors, who expressed clear disgust. I accidentally mentioned it to a gossip-loving neighbor, and it seems that the story about why we cut ties with them spread throughout the neighborhood. Now, even years later, they are treated with more caution than necessary, with everyone thinking that family is crazy. Well, I just mentioned it without thinking, but I never promised not to tell others, and I only spoke the truth. Moreover, since they always flaunted their wealth and were disliked by relatives, those relatives now keep their distance, knowing that involvement with them leads to no good. The in-laws, somehow finding out we had a child, contacted us once, asking why we hadn't told them. I responded with maximum enthusiasm.
Oh. Are you going to buy us baby goods? Thank you so much. I'll send you a wish list later.
But suddenly the call was disconnected. They promised not to contact us, did they? Since then, there has been absolutely no contact from them, and it continues to this day. Our children have grown up. The eldest is now preparing for high school entrance. We've sometimes wondered if it's unfair to the kids not to know their paternal grandparents, but they seem fine, so we reassure ourselves that it's for the best. William ensures he doesn't repeat his family's mistakes and showers equal love on all our children. We've also agreed to be self-reliant in our old age and not to burden our children. While we used to be troubled by the issues with his family, now it seems like it might have been a good experience, in a way. Still, it's definitely not something we'd want to go through again.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.